Hi everyone! This isn't my usual sort of video, but I thought it might be nice to do something different. Nearly 3 years ago, me and my mum were having a cream tea in Cornwall and we started having a fairly heated debate about how the word scone is pronounced. When mum ordered, I noticed that she said scone, but I say scone. There was no visible end to the debate, so we decided to make a survey and see which one was more popular and where. We had a hypothesis that different accents from different areas would say it differently. We made a simple 2-part questionnaire on Google Forms that we shared to our friends on Facebook and Twitter. We asked, how do you pronounce the word scone? And gave the options scone, scone, other. And then, where did you grow up? And listed all the 12 regions of the United Kingdom, as well as Ireland and other as options. At first, the responses came in fairly slowly. We launched at 6 p.m. and had nearly 200 in the first couple of hours. This was an initial few from our friends. The response rate slowed overnight, but by 6 a.m. we had over 450. This was due to our friends sharing it and then their friends picking up on it, with a flurry of responses around midday and another in the evening of day 2. This pattern repeated throughout day 3 until in the early hours of day 4 we had an hour without any responses at all. At this point we thought that might be as far as we were going to go, although at over 3,200 responses this wasn't too bad. Responses just stayed moving at a low rate for most of day 4 until the form was shared on Twitter by the Women's Institute on the evening of day 4 and then UNSA, the Unlimited Space Agency, on the morning of day 5. This caused the rate to really increase. Soon after, National Trust Scones, a Twitter account run by the author of the National Trust Scone recipe book, found out and shared it. Then it got a mention from Delia Smith. The response rate peaked at over 400 in an hour. The pattern we had noticed previously of small peaks at lunchtime and in the early evening, with lulls for a few hours after midnight, continued. The rate of responses then started to decrease. However, after 10 days we had over 22,000 people filling in our questionnaire. The form is still out there on the internet and we're still getting responses. The total now stands at over 23,000, the last one being on the 8th of April this year. The responses we got were spread all over the world, and the spread is shown on these maps. Each colour represents pronunciation in that country or state. Blue is scone, red is scone. Purple represents half and half. Obviously, our first responses were in the UK. Surprisingly, it only took 35 responses until we had an answer from someone who had grown up in South Africa. Afterwards, it spread into mainland Europe, with Germany, Denmark and France, and our first American responder at 212. We'll go into more detail about the spread across the USA later. The next country to be represented was back in Africa, Kenya, before more European results with Bosnia, Spain, Greece and Turkey. We reached Indonesia at response number 262. That's 7 countries over 4 continents within 500 responders. Wow! Our first Australian response came at number 506, Russia 569, and at 871 we reached Mexico, our first foray into South America. The survey had responses from 75 different countries and 6 continents. And although people do live in Antarctica, I don't think anyone grows up there, so this would be very difficult to get. The odd thing is that it seemed to have no pattern when it was spreading, which we really did expect. As you can see, there's quite a variation in pronunciation in different parts of the world. Here's a video showing the spread across the USA. We managed to reach all 50 states. Once again, blue represents scone and red represents scone. It started in New Jersey, then spread for a few states around that area until it suddenly jumped to California. It then continued to spread through the states from those 2 points, going into the middle until the last state, West Virginia, was coloured in. I don't know if the spreading towards the middle was a pattern or just a coincidence, but I'm not sure why it would have spread like that. Also, I didn't realise that the uncoloured part at the top was part of Michigan. That should be blue as well. I am amazed that we reached every single state, and by the overwhelming support for scone. We had over 17,000 responses in total from the UK. Here is a map of the UK with the regional areas shaded in. Oddly, by the time we got a response from North Wales, we'd already reached South Africa, Denmark, Germany, France, the USA and Kenya. By far the most common pronunciation in the UK is Scone, which is somewhat disappointing, with 66% of the respondents pronouncing it that way compared to only 32 who pronounce it Scone. But there are interesting variations in the ratios between regions. Here are the pie charts showing the actual numbers for each of the UK regions. There's a link in the description of the video to all this data if you would like to investigate it further for yourselves. On our questionnaire form, it was possible to tick the Other option and type in an alternative answer. Some of these responses were quite interesting, for a number of reasons. A lot of people told the joke, when you eat a scone, it's gone, which was funny the first few hundred times we read it. We also had quite a few mention that they use scone for singular, but scones for plural. There were some people who said they used scone for a plain one, but scone for one containing fruit. Some of the other responses were nothing short of baffling and made us wonder if people had maybe been filling in the wrong questionnaire. By far my favourite of what we called the non-standard answers from all the 23,000 responses was this one, which deserves being read out. I'm a very pedantic and socially awkward linguist, and I always match what my interlocutor says to minimise conversational conflict of any sort. If I don't know how my interlocutor says it, I say both in a questioning tone in the hope that they will A, tell me how they say it, and B, that instead of being told I'm wrong, we'll have a little conversation about the quirks of dialectal variation in English. One other thing that came up now and again was people who thought that those who pronounce it in a particular way were posh. This seemed to vary by region as well, and there seemed to be very little consistency, though it did result in some heated debate on social media, as these things often do. One thing we were a little concerned about was spam. No, not that sort of spam. There was nothing stopping people from submitting multiple responses, and we knew this would become more of a problem as more people got involved. As it turned out, the spam was fairly easy to spot. Here you can see us scrolling through the responses in the spreadsheet. As you can see, there's a fairly random distribution of answers from several different regions. There are occasional clusters of identical responses, but they could be explained by, say, a particular household or group of friends responding in a short space of time. But here is an example of some suspicious results. Lots of identical answers from identical regions being posted just a few seconds apart. This particular person seems to have spent around 15 minutes posting over 70 identical responses for some reason. We removed any obvious spam like this from our dataset, though interestingly it made very little difference to our overall results, showing that our dataset was large enough that it hadn't been affected by the small amounts of survey abusers we had. Here's a comparison of the UK regional responses from our original 21,000 response dataset with the spam removed compared to the raw non-spam filtered data from the 23,000 responses we had up to now. You can see that there's minimal difference between the results, so in reality spam answers have very little effect. Fairly early on in our survey, people told us about similar surveys that had been done. There was a YouGov survey in 2016 which asked the same questions. They only had 1,669 respondents and they had fewer regional zones to choose from. It's still interesting data though, and it largely tallies with our data. Another larger and more comprehensive survey we found out about was carried out by a team at Cambridge University, also in 2016. We got in touch with Dr. Adrian Lehman and Dr. Tam Blackster, who led the team, and asked them about their research, which is part of a much bigger project called the Variation and Change in Modern English, which used an app they developed to crowdsource data on regional variations in dialect. They gave us permission to use their map in this presentation and told us that the map was based off around 30,000 respondents, making their dataset a little larger than ours but comparable. It was really nice to get the support of people with actual PhDs in the subject. Here's the map from the Cambridge study alongside the heat map of our results. As you can see, our data agrees quite nicely with the data from their research. They've used slightly different colours to us. We both used red for Scone and blue for Scone, but they used yellow for the more 50-50 areas, whereas we used purple. The questions we asked were slightly different, because we asked, where did you grow up, whereas the Cambridge study asked, where do you live, but I think you'll agree our results are quite comparable. A few days after we started our survey, when it first started going viral, a journalist from the Daily Mirror got in touch and asked if they could write an article about our research and results. But we refused, telling that we wanted to publish the results ourselves. I hope you're all a little more informed on the intricacies of Scone pronunciation. It's been quite a fun project, and it's been nice to finally compile all the data and make a presentation about it. An added bonus is that we got to eat a lot of scones in the process. I suppose the next bit of research to be done is to settle the great Devon-Cornwall debate on whether it's jam first or cream first. That might be the subject of a future survey, but I've had enough number crunching for now. In the meantime, I'm just going to enjoy eating this scone, which is what we have to call them when Mum makes them, though I am, and will very much remain, in the blue scone team. Thanks for watching!